Hey, this is Annie, and today we're going to be learning how to draw a cupcake. This is a tidbit from my course, and let's get lucid. So let's start with the basics. So what does a cupcake look like? And what I think a cupcake looks like is we have our base. So maybe we'll start with a shape kind of like this. It's a rectangle. And what we can do is we can add in, a layer of, this is kind of like the muffin, right? And then we can put like our toppings on top of it. So because it's a sketch, we could kind of just freehand it, which is what I'm doing. And of course, the dollop. It's kind of like a little hairdo for your cupcake. And then from there, I like to kind of just, make it a little darker and then puff it out maybe. So maybe something like this. So we can start like that as our basis. And of course, you don't have to follow along strictly like this. You could go ahead and decorate your cupcake however you please as well. And then also if you want to make your cupcake taller, you can add in more of the cream, right, to build it up. Or you can kind of just, maybe you want your cupcake to be smaller, so you can take away some of the, I guess, cream of it. So that's kind of what I have to start. And then the next thing we'll do is we'll go into our layers and we'll click the plus. And from there, we're going to be adding in the base color. So for myself, maybe I'm going to pick my palette that I usually choose from. And I'm going to maybe use a blue color. And I like to switch my pencil at this point to, or my brush rather, to maybe I want a calligraphy brush and I want it to be the monoline. So I'm going to use the monoline and I'm going to draw the base. So, and again, a quick tip, if you draw a line and you hold it, it becomes straight. So do you see how it snaps? So if you just hold it, it'll snap into place. And yes, you can do your own cupcake however you want to do it. So if you want something like this. And remember too, a quick tip is if you want to delete a line, double tap, or not double tap, use your fingers and then tap it once. That deletes your line. The other way to delete a line or something that you did is if you go over to, I'm going to draw on it really quick, but if you go over right here, this undoes it, and then of course you can redo it on the bottom. But that's a quick tip and a reminder. So do that. And of course, you can clean your lines with the eraser. And then another quick tip is if you click onto the color and drag it and drop, it fills it all in. So that's the base of the cupcake. It's very plain, but that's because we have one color right now. And later on, we'll start adding the shadows, of course, and the highlights, which makes it pop out. And so the next thing we'll do is let's add in, I'm going to call it the muffin. So it's like the base of it. So I'm just gonna do, oops, I'm just gonna do something like that. Hold it and you'll get a smooth line. Hold it again, and then just drop the color. And what you can do is you can put your layer 3 underneath your layer 2. So then the wrapper of the cupcake goes over the actual cupcake. So that's where we're at right now. And now time for the fun part. We're going to add some frosting. So in order to do that, I'm going to use the color pink. So I'm just going to add in a new layer with the plus. And let's select pink. I'm going to go back and use my monoline. And now I'm going to start creating some frosting. Ooh, so if you hold it too long, it becomes an oval, and I did not mean for that to happen, so I'm gonna click once with 2 fingers, and that deletes it. So I'm just gonna smooth out the line a little bit. I'm gonna use this. And of course, maybe I'll and you can always rotate your canvas. So how you can do that is if you use 2 of your fingers, what you can do is you can spin it to the right, you can spin it to the left, and that rotates your canvas. So that's what I'm doing right here, right? And then of course, you can put it back into center by just moving it. And so I like to do that. That way I wouldn't have to, move my iPad around the way. Instead, I just move the canvas. So I'm gonna do that right here. Clean up the lines a little bit. And then of course, add in more of the frosting. So what I'll do is, in order to not confuse myself, I'm going to turn off the layer, and you can turn off a layer by clicking the check mark. So I clicked the check mark, and now I don't see it. And so I'm going to be on my layer 5, and I'm just going to keep drawing my frostings. Oops, I did it again, where I held too long, and if you hold too long, it becomes an oval, and that is not the shape that I'm going for. So this is the shape that I'm going for, and then again, click onto the color, drop it, and that's your frosting. And if you want to draw an ice cream instead, go for it. It's more or less the same shape. So I'm going to add another one, and I'm going to keep building my frosting. So that's this right here. Drop it in. And that's how it's been built right now. And of course, because it's the same color, you're not going to see where it ends and where it begins, but that's okay because this is when we'll start adding in the highlights and the shadows. So of course I'm gonna turn this all off for now, so then I don't get confused while I build up the frosting a little bit more. So this is the top frosting for myself, and I'm gonna drag and drop. And I'm gonna reorganize a little bit. I'm gonna put the top layer all the way at the bottom. That way it covers it. And so now what we're gonna do is we're going to start adding in the highlights and the shadow. And of course, before we do that, let's get rid of our layer / our layer 1, which is our sketch. So get rid of that by swiping left and clicking delete. So I don't want that anymore. And we can start by going to the bottom and let's start adding highlights and shadows for all of our frosting. So in order to do that, I'm going to go back to my color. I'm going to move it slightly lower. Oops, move it slightly lower. Accidentally changed the color, but move it slightly lower when you're on your color, and then you can pick your brush. And I'm going to choose a soft pastel for my shadow and highlights. So I'm going to go back in, and I have it on clipped onto the top of the frosting, so I'm going to work on that. You can see shadows. So I have a shadow on the bottom. And of course, I like to add in highlights. So that's just a lighter color of the pink. So maybe something like that. And we're going to do the same for all of our frosting. So a lighter color. Ooh, I'm not on, okay, so a reminder, you might not be on the correct layer, which I am not on my correct layer. So what you can do to check what layer you're on, / what layer it's clipped onto, you can of course click hide and unhide the check mark so you know where you're clipping it on. So now I'm on the right one. And you can also, if you hold it with the color drop tool, you can select the same color you were using previously. I'm going to have to reorder this because it should be all flipped. So make sure too that it's in the correct order. So in order to do that, as a key, I'm going to draw it out, but the top part should be behind. So this layer should be on the bottom, and then you have this layer, which is layer 6 for myself, and that should be near the bottom, and then we start building, right? And then I'm going to move that because this should go here. Of course, unclip it. So that's the correct layer. So it might get confusing, but you can always check by clicking the check mark, which lets you see which layer you're working with. So I'm going to go back here and I'm going to keep going with my shadow and my highlights. Then adding it on. So it might be helpful too if you renamed some of your layers. So maybe I'll do that a little bit later, but first I'll just do the shadow and the highlights really quick, and then I'll start renaming. So a lot of it is repetition. We're kind of doing the same things over and over again. Okay. So that's kind of a basic look of my cupcake. And right now I'm going to start renaming these just so I don't get super confused. So I'm going to name this base of the cupcake. And for this, I'm going to name this so I'm going to name it 4. Let's see. And this will be 3. 2 and 1. So 1 is the one that I just turned off and on. 2, 3, and 4. So that way I know which of the layers correspond to where. And then of course this is kind of, I'm gonna call this the muffin, or like the bread part of the cupcake. And I'm just gonna leave it at that for now. And we're gonna keep going with our shadows and our highlights. So I'm gonna pick the base of the color. So I used the color drop tool, and I'm gonna go back into my color palette and I'm gonna move it a little bit down. And that just means that it's gonna be a little bit darker. So always have a little bit of shade for the bottom. And if we move it a little bit higher, we get a lighter color. And so that's the highlight. But for this, I think we're gonna need a darker color underneath the frosting. So maybe it's something like this. And of course, you can go back into your drawing as well, and you can keep adding in the shadows and the highlights in order to gain even more dimension and more detail, right? So that's kind of the basis of this. And what I'm going to do with the base of the cupcake is I'm going to clean up the lines a little bit with my eraser tool, which is located on the top right. I'm just going to go in and check what brush I'm using, and I'm going to clean up some of the lines. So what I'm also going to do is I'm going to just go in there and make a little bit of a ridge. So I'm just going in and erasing a bit. So that's kind of what it looks like right now. And then I'm going to go into my layers and I'm going to add in a new layer. And this new layer will be for the base of the cupcake slash the wrapper of the cupcake rather, and it's just going to be the highlight and of course the shadow. And this time I'm going to go a little bit further and add lines, right? So let's do that. And of course, don't forget to clip it. So I'm going to pick a darker color and push my brush a little bit bigger. So that's kind of the basis of it, right? And of course, there's still not enough details, and what we can do to solve for that is add in another layer, and we're going to clip it, And this time you can add in your lines. So change your brush, and I'm going to change it to brush right above soft pastel, and I'm going to make it a darker shade of blue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the wrapper of the cupcake and let's begin making lines. And again, remember, this is the perfect time to just draw and hold. And when you hold, you get straight lines. So draw and hold, straight lines. Draw and hold, you get straight lines. And that's the sum of how you would draw a cupcake. And if you thought this was fun, please do subscribe. And until next time, take care and keep shiny.